This is the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers. Together, let's drive.
Oh yeah, we are keeping the party going on this celebration-filled weekend for Dallas sports fans. If you're staying up late with us, you are one of the real troopers. Welcome to the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. I'm Jonah Javad. He's Andrew Cely. Andrew, I was outside the Mavs game after they beat the Thunder last night in Game 6. I almost got whisked away by a mob of fans, but I made it back here. A little beer is dried in my hair, but so be it. It's the spoils of victory, I suppose.
Yeah, and when you think back on the last 48 hours, starting with Scottie Scheffler getting arrested on Friday morning, then heading with the overtime winner of the Stars that night before, I mean, it has been a wild sequence over the last couple days here. So I guess with that in mind, let's get right into what's on the show.
Here's What's on the Show, sponsored by NFM.
History was made on Saturday as for the first time ever, the Mavericks and Stars both clinched spots in their respective Western Conference Finals. We'll then open up with a Mavs discussion after a wild finish to Game 6 and a conversation about Luka Doncic and some other players that have stepped up on the Mavs run. Then we'll hit the Stars on their improbable run, knocking out the last two Stanley Cup champs. And last but not least, a new game segment for y'all. It's called Which is More Likely? We'll get into the specifics later, but we got some interesting scenarios up for grabs later on. Jonah, that is what's on the show. Now, who's on the show?
No, I'm just hoping that gaming segment is a lot less complicated than last week's. That was rough.
I heard.
Anyway, let's get to who's on the show. Bob Sturm from The Ticket, Saad Yousuf from The Athletic. Thanks for joining us, gents. Obviously, Mavs and Stars loaded show. So the Mavs beat OKC in Game 6. They're going on to the Western Conference Finals for the second time in 3 years. This team looks a lot different than the one we saw last year, and especially the one we saw a couple of years ago. But through these first two playoff series, what have we learned about this Mavericks team? Saad, we'll start with you.
Well, I think we've learned that they can win in a lot of different ways. And I think that was their biggest flaw before the trade deadline was if the shots were falling, they were winning and it was great. But they didn't have a whole lot of presence inside, and they weren't able to win if the three-point shot wasn't falling. And now with P.J. Washington and Daniel Gafford, what they've done, and of course we can't not talk about Derek Lively and the performance that he's had. I think it goes so far beyond what Luka and Kyrie are. And, you know, we've talked about those two ad nauseum, and rightfully so. But Kyrie, I think, still has another level that he can take his game at this point. But what we've learned about the Mavericks so far is that they're able to win in a lot of different ways with a lot of different contributors.
Yeah, I've found myself thinking this is not even close to the Mavs' ceiling. I mean, Luka's playing on one leg. Kyrie just doesn't even play a first half for the most part. I mean, at 4 points at halftime last night and then flips a switch and scores 18 in the second half of Game 6. Bob, what stood out to you through these first two rounds?
Yeah, I think Saad's on to a lot of stuff. Just the identity has changed so dramatically. And for those of us who have been following this team a really long time, that identity is sort of stuck with them through generations, that they are a finesse team, a pretty team, a perimeter team, and that's changed. And by the way, it's changed almost overnight. Even if you look at the Western Conference Finals team of 2022, it's unrecognizable to this crew. This crew can dominate in the paint. They can win without hitting their threes. They dunk all day long. They sometimes control the paint and the glass. They can actually bully other teams. And I think the entire league is still kind of catching up on the idea that the Dallas Mavericks are actually one of those playoff rugged teams that are more than happy to drag you out to the deep water and see if you can swim. And I just think that's how you win in this league. You're not just going to have great shooting nights. You have to have other ways to do it. And it seems like they can now. And so for me, a lot of the credit has to go to the architects of this entire operation.
Yeah, I agree. Jason Kidd taking the Mavs to the conference finals 2 times in his first 3 years. And he's gotten a lot of grief from some Mavericks fans over those last 3 years. But, I mean, when the lights are at their brightest, this team rises to the occasion. And coaching, obviously, Nico Harrison's played a huge role in bringing in the right pieces for this team, especially at the trade deadline. Got to give props to the front office because so much we put into the X's and O's of these performances from the players, but bringing in the right guys to get those W's is obviously a big factor.
And I want to jump in on there because I think we all elevate Rick Carlisle and what he did here to such a degree, and yet now Kidd has the most Western Conference Finals appearances of any coach in Mavs history, and that's a little hard to juggle sometimes with the criticisms that we've laid at his feet. But you can't argue with results. He's done a remarkable job, and I know we'd like to talk about culture not changing overnight. On a certain level, it did. And the moment you bring Gafford and Washington in, everything changed. And it started with that first game against the Thunder, which they blew them out. And that kind of set the stage for this latest run.
I would take it even back to the offseason. Derrick Jones Jr. has been, dollar for dollar, one of the big additions for them. Also in the locker room, he's just a great chemistry guy for them. And Derek Lively the second, incredible addition to this team as a rookie, and given what he's gone through, to go plus 26 in Game 6 was amazing. Bob, I'm curious, to you from not just Game 6, but that whole series against the Thunder, who stood out to you the most outside of the superstar duo of Luka and Kyrie? Who was kind of that third star in your eyes?
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of this thing, is it does change night to night, and that's an exciting thing. That tells you actually do have a team that's all, reading from the same page, and all it's a cogent design. And so, not to avoid your question, but I think some nights there's Derrick Jones and other nights PJ Washington, and they sort of interchange for each other almost in a way that Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively do. And so they have these interchangeable parts. And by the way, PJ Washington was interchangeable in the first round with Maxi Kleba. And so, they have these guys who are sort of like for like, and I love that design. I assume it's not by accident, that they want guys who sort of can switch out for each other. Now, I don't know if Jaden Hardy and Dante Exum are exactly the same thing, but now we've seen that role sort of switch. So what that does is it gives you a redundancy that, hey, this guy may not be feeling it tonight. This guy may be in foul trouble, but here's this other guy who is a facsimile of that and maybe can pick up the slack. And I think that's the type of way you have to think about things when you have to beat a team 4 times in 2 weeks. So it all sort of makes sense to me right now in a way that, frankly, at times Rick Carlisle and Donnie Nelson didn't always look like they talked to each other. If I may use Jalen Brunson as a great example, where one guy seems to really like him and one guy is like, I don't know really. And so, it seems like Nico and Jason Kidd and whoever else is in that brain trust seem to be visiting with each other and agreeing with the way they see the game.
And it seems like a team that plays for each other, and the level of selflessness you see permeate throughout the roster really fortifies that culture that they've built there. They really look like a team that loves each other, and typically when you get that plus talent, leads to great things.
I'm also going to jump in here and say, remember how the playoffs started with that blowout loss to the Clippers? What a difference a couple weeks makes, right?
Yeah.
And you could say the same thing for the Stars, too.
Oh, what a beautiful segue.
There we go. We go. And when we come back, we're talking about the Stars and their run so far, going through 2 Stanley Cup champs. Stay with us in the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show.
Today's headlines, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers.
The Timberwolves stun the defending champion Nuggets in Denver 98-90, meaning Minnesota will take on Dallas in the Western Conference Final. Game 1 between the Mavs and Wolves is Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. at the Target Center in Minneapolis. Xander Schauffele finally breaks through with his first major victory at this year's PGA Championship, sealing the win with a birdie on the 18th to finish at 21 under. Bryson DeChambeau was the runner-up, 1 stroke back at 20 under. And the Rangers dropped the final game of their series against the Angels 4-1. The bullpen gave up 4 runs in the top of the 7th. Texas falls back to 500 and will start a 3-game series in Philly on Tuesday night. Welcome back to the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Just like the crew at the AAC, we're switching out the hardwood with the ice. Stars in
certainly a very different position than we thought they might be after going down 0-2 to Vegas. Now all of a sudden they might be the best team remaining in the field. How do you put this run in perspective?
They were the 1 seed for a reason.
Yes.
They beat the reigning Cup champions in round 1 in 7 games. Then they take care of the top scoring team in hockey in round 2. And now they go to round 3. And I thought Stars coach Pete DeBoer summed it up perfectly after the Game 6 victory in Colorado, saying, after a gauntlet like that, It's kind of crazy. We're only halfway there. So, Saad, we will start with you. Is this Western Conference final matchup going to be the easiest of their first 3 rounds of the playoffs?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you look at they played 2 very different style of teams in the first 2 rounds between Vegas and Colorado, and they've come out on top against both of them. And to me, as you mentioned, Jonah, they're the number 1 seed for a reason. And I think you're seeing a lot of those reasons on display. And for me, it's all about what they do within themselves. As long as they can stay healthy, and obviously they're dealing with a couple of things, most notably with Rope Hintz. But as long as they can stay healthy, I believe that the depth that they have and the way that their goaltender is playing right now and giving them what he's been giving them, I think it's all on their plate, and they'll be able to take care of business no matter who they play. And I think right now we've seen it with Colorado and with Vegas. They're able to play a hard-hitting, violent series. They're able to outskill you. It really doesn't matter because they have all the tools in their box.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of assuming because it makes a you-know-what out of you and me. But Bob, assuming the hard part's over, is round 3 the easiest for them?
Man, I really get nervous when we talk like that, to be honest, because every team in the Final Four believes they're a team of destiny. There's just no other way to define winning 2 rounds to get there. I hear what you're saying, and yes, choosing between the 3rd round matchup versus Vegas or Colorado, you're absolutely right. You would say stacking them in terms of difficulty, this would be 3 out of 3, but there's nothing easy about a conference final or a cup final against anybody. And every single team of the remaining 4 will say, this is our year. We're going to win the cup. That we're a team of destiny. And 3 of them are going to be flat out wrong. 3 of them are going to have a very sad day where they have to clean out their locker and talk to the media and say where they took a wrong turn. And this year Dallas is determined not to be that team. And honestly, guys, for the first time since the cup year, well, you know what? Let me be fair. 2000. The 2000 year, I thought they were going to win the cup. I might be a homer. And since then, they've had some really good teams. And I've never quite thought they were the best team. And finally this year, with the trade of Chris Tanev, I believe they're the best team in hockey, and I believe they can get 8 more wins. Now they have to do it because what I think really doesn't matter, but this is the first time I've looked at them since Ed Belfour was between the pipes and said, you know what, this is a team that is capable and worthy of winning a Stanley Cup, and it's a great feeling to watch them play.
Okay, so let's take that one step further. Saad, the Stars win the Stanley Cup this year if blank.
Honestly, to me, it goes back to just staying healthy because everything else, they have all the pieces in play. And this is kind of where you also have to give a nod to Jim Nill because I don't just believe that he's the best general manager in the NHL. I believe what he's put forth is one of the best jobs in sports. Just, when you look at what Bob just talked about with Chris Tanev, that's a trade deadline acquisition. Matt Duchene scored the game winner. That's your free agency. And maybe the 2 best performers in the playoffs have been Wyatt Johnson, Jake Oettinger, and there's your drafting. As a general manager, it's been one of the most flawless jobs that he's done in terms of getting to this point. And so for me, to your question, Jonah, I think it's really they just need to stay healthy. And I believe that the performances will all come. And that's the beauty of where this team is. Because if Joe Pavelski seems to fade a little bit from the playoffs, well, you're going to have somebody else stepping up right up in that role because that's how deep this team that Jim Nill has constructed is.
Bob, what about you?
Yeah, there's so many guys that have never touched the cup, including their head coach, but Pavelski and Jamie Benn, and you start going down the list of those guys who are so close that the closer they get, they actually might start sprinting faster. So I'm right there with Saad. They got to get Rope back. I'm a little concerned about his status, but if he's back, I think this team has what it takes to get all 8.
Yeah. I'm gonna jump in here real quick and say what Bob's been saying on Twitter, which is trust Jake Oettinger at this point. He's earned your trust with every performance in every round for the last few years, and if it's gone wrong, it's been a blip on the radar. Bob, can you talk a little bit about what Otter's done so far?
Well, yeah, the test of a true great, or at least a very, very good goaltender. I guess we need to see if he's great here in the next month or so. But the ability to respond from losses and the ability to stand tall on the road when it's kind of you against the opponent. And I think Friday night, Game 6 in Colorado, if you go back and look at that first period, Ottinger's kind of back there doing it on his own, keeping them in the game, keeping them alive. That is Ed Belfour stuff. That's championship stuff. And because they're getting that performance from him, and then Tanev in front of him, and Miro and those guys, I really think they are capable of winning the whole thing.
And some of those saves in overtime of Game 6 were just unbelievable. Unbelievable performance.
Living on the edge. Anyway, on that note, we're done with the Mavs and Stars conversation. It's time to play a game. When we come back, it's Which Is It? What is the name of it? We'll figure it out here coming up. Stay with us on the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Welcome back to the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Last week we introduced a new game. This week we are doing the same. It's top 5 Scotty Scheffler memes. I'm kidding. It's a game we like to call Which Is More Likely.
And now it's time for Which Is More Likely, sponsored by the Fort Worth Convention and Visitors Bureau.
All right, the name of the game is pretty much exactly what you'd expect. I will present our panelists with a pair of scenarios, and we discuss which is more likely. The rules are simple, so let's get into it with our first scenario, and this pairs nicely with our discussion so far. Which is more likely, the Mavs advance to the NBA Finals or the Stars advance to the Stanley Cup Final? Jonah, we'll start with you.
Stars, just for the reasons we spoke about in the previous segment. I feel like the toughest teams they could possibly face are behind them. And so if, whoever they face next, I feel like that's an easier opponent than the Mavericks.
Saad, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would go with Stars as well. And then, just to piggyback on Bob's last point, when your goaltender is giving you the play that Jake Ottinger is, it's hard to bet against that.
And then, Bob, last thing, any dissension here? Are you with them?
No, it's absolutely the Stars. The Mavs have probably reached their ceiling. It would be cool to be wrong, but the Stars are not near their ceiling yet.
So with the Stars, the Mavs, the Rangers winning the World Series, I suppose it's time we take a little nod to the Mr. Irrelevant of the city right now, and that is the Dallas Cowboys. With our second scenario, this is Dak's last year in Dallas, or Mike McCarthy gets fired mid-season. Saad, why don't you start us off on this one?
Boy, that's a tough one. I'll go with this is Dak's last year in Dallas is probably a little bit more likely just because of – it's a two-way street. I think the Mike McCarthy decision is a one-man decision. I think where we might be discounting the fact that Dak might look to walk after this season if things don't go right.
Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, I would probably go the opposite, even though I don't know that either is particularly likely. But I would say, given the Kirk Cousins business and the Jared Goff business we just witnessed, I think the league is telling you if you have a quarterback who's anywhere close to MVP level or All-Pro level, you don't let him walk at age 30. And I think that would be nuts. But I can find another coach, and that's probably the way I would go.
I think my question is, though, if the season goes sideways, who gets it? And most of that's probably going to land on Dak's shoulders and McCarthy to some degree, because Dak will likely not be performing in those games. So does that not play into the same conversation then? Jonah, what do you think?
I think the mid-season is the caveat there. I think it's just more likely that McCarthy gets fired than Dak leaving, period. Mid-season makes this a little bit harder. I just don't see them making a move kind of in season like that. But when it comes down to between quarterback and coach, I think keeping Dak is more likely.
All right. And with that, I suppose let's keep the Cowboys on the docket with our final scenario.
We can't have a sports show without the Cowboys,
Of course. We've spent literally 20 minutes talking about the Mavs and Stars, so it's time to at least bring up the Cowboys and our favorite topic, Scotty Scheffler this week. Which is more likely, Jerry Jones sells the Cowboys or Louisville PD releases the body cam footage of Scotty Scheffler's arrest? Bob, can you lead us off on this one?
Those are 2 zeros, aren't they? I don't know if I give you one, but Scotty, all charges will be dropped, before many people even see this, and Jerry will certainly never sell the team. So I'm going to cop out and say you just presented 2 zeros to me.
Well, it's not no fence riding, so I can't yell at you for that one. Saad, what's your thought?
Yeah, I mean, even I don't know if whatever the case of the footage is or the charges, anything is more likely than Jerry selling the Cowboys.
That's fair enough. I'm just sitting here saying we had a report this morning that the body cam footage, that there was none, even though the box was checked on the official report. So it seems a little interesting that Louisville PD has already stepped their foot in this a little bit over the last few years, dealing with it again.
Moment of silence for Officer Gillis's pants that were destroyed beyond repair. In a value of what? Was it $80?
$80.
All right, it's time to let our panelists go. Saad, Yousuf of The Athletic, and Bob Sturm from The Ticket. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. It was great to have you on.
Stay with us on the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Jonah will have his final take after the break. Welcome back to the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. Time now for Jonah's final take.
All right, it's not so much a final take as it is an observation. How good has the road been for sports teams from DFW? You saw the Texas Rangers go 11-0 on the road en route to winning the World Series this past fall. The Stars are 5-1 on the road this postseason, and the Mavs are 4-2 on the road in the NBA playoffs. I think we figured out why the Cowboys lost their playoff game, Andrew.
Well, they were wearing white jerseys, so it's only right, I suppose, right? They tried their best, but I suppose they couldn't get out of their own way.
If only they were on the road, that would have changed it, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we've got some conference finals to get to, and that's going to be coming up on next week's show. We're looking forward to that. He's Andrew Cely. I'm Jonah Javad. This has been the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show. We will see you next week.
This has been the Ultimate Dallas Sports Show, sponsored by your North Texas Chevy dealers. Together, let's drive.